Yes, maybe it helps a lot if you just don't tell them the truth about what you want to do. Then when you're a hit, you say, didn't I tell you about that? The story of Laugh-In probably would last longer than the series did. Laugh-In was indeed a combination of many elements that had gone before it. It was burlesque, it was vaudeville, it was theater, it was radio, it was all the art forms that had gone before. And I was kind of a comedy junkie when I was a kid. And I worked at the St. Louis Municipal Opera, and we did a show every week. But in the middle of the day, we had a break. And I would go to the Grand Burlesque House in St. Louis, and I saw all the guys, Tommy Moraft and Billy Zoot Reed, and I fell in love with the comics. So I began a career in television, and NBC owed me a favor. I don't know whether you can use this or not, but I did the first 5 years of the Grammy Awards before there was really enough money to make the awards. So every year we would go over to Henry Mancini's house and get his awards, and those are the ones we gave out for the first 5 years until they got enough money to do this, to make the awards. So NBC wanted me to do another year, and I said, I really don't want to do that, And so I said, I'll do it if you let me do one show my way, just no interference. And they kind of reluctantly, but they said, oh, well, what the hell, And then they realized that I meant it. And we came in with a 200-page script, and we started rounding up people that I had seen. Artie Johnson had been selling clothes at Carroll's in Beverly Hills. And Gary Owens was an announcer, and they were all just working people, professionals, but not known at all. And we just assembled them. Interesting thing was, which could never happen today, nobody ever auditioned for Laugh-In. We just saw them and say, okay, you come in and you're going to do it, and you do this. And we saw Goldie Hawn came into the office and said, okay, you're going to do the show. And she said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, I don't have the slightest idea. But what happened, we assembled this group of very talented character people, really. They were not comics. They were not any stand-up comics. Dan and Dick did one of the funniest stand-up acts ever. And Timex wanted a host, so we said, I will have Ron and Martin host it. And we assembled this group of people, along with a group of writers who were truly outrageous, and from every area. A couple of them were cartoonists, a couple of them were political hacks, really passionate political people, and some of them were just joke junkies. And we put 15 writers in a room, and we wrote 6 days a week, and everything that was funny, and put together an assemblage of this huge script and then organized it. Long answer to a short question, but what Laugh-In capitalized on was accident. It was an accident that it got on. It was an accident that it stayed on. It was an accident that they let us do it. And it was television without a net. There was no way to get out. I mean, you did a joke, and we never said cut on stage. No matter what happened, we went on, because we weren't live, we were edited. And so if something went wrong, kept right on going and worked our way out of it. And if it didn't work, we'd take it out. So there was no safety net, and you had to perform your way out. Many times that's what we used. NBC wanted to do a whole special on Laugh-In outtakes. And I said, what are you, nuts? You think I have a shelf full of Goldie Hawn mistakes? Laugh-In was an outtake. If anything happened funny, hey, hello, and we put it on the air. Print. Jack Benny once was tuning. He went da-da-da-da-da-da, and he was over on this side. And he said, how about that, tuning up for this show? And I said, print that, will you? He said, I wasn't doing anything. That's what went on the air. So there was a great deal of accident, a lot of humor, a lot of combination of elements. It was visual, it was satirical, it was silly, it was, it had a lot to do with what was going on, the culture at the time. And as Lily used to say, Lily said, we were feeding back on the culture. And that's what we were. And then along came Lily Tomlin. Along came Goldie Hawn. How about those for accidents, huh? What Laugh-In did was to combine all of the existing elements and to feed back on the culture. We reflected what was going on at the time. Until then, everything was either a stage show, theatrical, and we removed the proscenium. We broke the fourth wall. We went out into location. And sometimes we showed the cameras, and NBC, there's a mistake. We saw the camera and said, wait, Sparky, you don't think people know there's a camera? So we showed the camera when America's going to tune out. We had fun. It was a bunch of adolescent adults in a gigantic, multicolored playpen, approaching the wall as far as what you could say and do and what you could talk about. And it was bawdy but not dirty. It was irreverent but not sacrilegious. It was contemporary satire. And a man by the name of Digby Wolfe had been in England and had written That Was the Week That Was, a lot of the David Frost things, and he was brilliant. So Digby brought in the British sense of silly and his own awareness politically, because until Digby probably I was not that involved politically. You know. We probably put 6 censors in the home. We would write anything that came up, we would put on paper and then put it in the script. And they would go crazy. You can't say this, you can't say that. And we'd begin to negotiate. You know, and sometimes they cut the wrong thing and a joke got on that shouldn't have gotten on. But they'd come back with paper clips in the script. Right? And there's a whole wall full of scripts there. When they got through with the paper clips, the scripts were this thick, you know. And so we'd sit down and negotiate. It was hysterical. And one time, we had a big sign up that said Citizen Action Committee of America. And it was up there for about 12 shows. And we got a wonderful man by the name of Hermione Traviesis, who was Hispanic. And he came in, sat the first day and looked, and he said, "Whoa, you can't say that." I said, "What?" He said, "Citizen Action Committee of America." I said, "Why can't we say that?" He said, "You know, look at the initials spelled." I said, "What?" He said, "Spelled caca." And I said, "Caca? What's caca?" And he said, "You know, caca." And I said, "No, I don't know. What are you talking about, caca?" He said, "You know, caca, like doo-doo." I said, "Wait, caca, doo-doo." It doesn't say doo-doo. It says Citizen Action, but it spells caca. Well, these 2 men standing, 2 adults standing on stage, discussing the merits of caca versus doo-doo and whether or not we could have a sign up there. And it stayed, but it was a hysterical conversation. I wish I had taped the conversation. It was as funny as anything in the show. Caca, you can't say that. But that was the kind of thing we did. And we would tell the band not to laugh. If the band laughed, we were dead. So we'd have the band laugh at straight lines. And these suits would come down and say, "Hold it, hold it, hold it. You can't say that." And we'd say, "Oh, okay, you caught us." And then we'd say something that we truly should not have been allowed to say. But then we would laugh at straight lines. And they'd say, "No, no, that's got to go." And, but little things they never did see. Lily Tomlin, before she taped her first piece, which was just, we knew it was going to explode the moment she walked out on its stage with Ernestine, right? Right before she taped, I said, "Hey, Lily, 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 dial with this finger." And she would say, "Oh," and she would dial. Nobody ever saw that this was the finger she was dialing with because it was sideways. Had the dial been above, she couldn't have been like that. So when you see Lily, you'll see her dialing with this thing. Those little miracles we were able to pull off added the fun to it. We would tape till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's strange enough, there were no really artificial stimulants on the stage. It was a pretty straight, sober, and occasionally, you know, we'd have a beverage or something. But we worked so hard, so many days and so many hours, you know, that it was, we went at such a high level of energy. And we have 2 things going on at the same time. But then we had to put it together. A lovely woman by the name of Carolyn Raskin would go down in the basement of NBC and put this stuff together, miles and miles of videotape, and then construct it into what became a show.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the...
it's a long answer, isn't it?
They're good material. And
how are you going to cut this? I don't know, right? Sparky, you go in there. We used to add, yeah, she used to edit laughing with a razor. We had to do physical splices on videotape. We didn't have computer editing then.
When I heard that, I was just
for
days.
It would be impossible today. It would be impossible to do the show today.
Why?
The subject matter, you can't do an ethnic joke today. Think about television. When did you hear an accent, an Italian, a Russian accent, a Jewish accent? No. When did you hear an ethnic joke? You can't tell them today. There's so many pressure groups, you know, not even mentioning the Christian Coalition. I told you not to mention the Christian Coalition. But there's so many pressure groups, and they're so... there are so many pressure groups, and they're so organized. With one flick of a computer, you can send out 500,000 emails complaining about anything. And of course, the networks, those people are not in those jobs that long. And when they get fired from that job, where do you go? So they're much more careful now. And we defied being careful. we chased Richard Nixon. Paul Keyes was one of the writers on Laugh-In, and he was Richard Nixon's joke writer. Now, that would not today be considered a major credit. I mean, best joke he ever wrote was, "I am not a crook." But Nixon was going to run for president. And I said, "How do we get Nixon to do this?" And Paul Keyes says, "We'll go over and ask him." So we went over to CBS, and he talked to Mr. Nixon. He said, "Well," he said, "I'm not much of this comedy, you know." I said, "Well, let's give it a shot." So I said, "Just turn to the camera and say, 'Sock it to me.'" "Sock it to me." No, Mr. Nixon. If you could just kind of lighten it up a little. You know, "Sock it to me." Yes. "What? Take two." You know. We said, "Yeah, take two." And he did it 6 times to get the take we used, where he turned, "Sock it to me," you know. And then all of his staff said, "You can't do that. It's terrible," you know. But in fact, it did elect him because it showed him involved in a contemporary way with contemporary people in a hip atmosphere. Because until then, you know, people thought they left his hanger in the coat, you know. But and then we tried to get Hubert Humphrey. I chased Hubert Humphrey all over the country, and he was afraid to do it. But he said not doing Laugh-In may have cost him the election. I've always had to live with that, you know. Damn. Jane Cooney said Sesame Street was a cleaned up Laugh-In. She said Laugh-In became Sesame Street, and Laugh-In became MTV without jokes. The attention span was shortening. Young people were reading faster. They were able to absorb more information. When a kid drove down the street, instead of a billboard, they were seeing signs on buses and signs on buildings and on cars. So they became aware of much more and able to absorb more information. And I guess my own somewhat minimal attention span, and I defined attention deficit disorder, and I got bored very quickly, you know, as you will be soon. And it just captured that kind of high energy of the 60s, you know, and there was the pill, and there was the Beatles, and there was the war. We had so much to talk about. People were burning their bras, you know. And Phyllis Diller said things like, "I should have taken mine off first," and there was much to talk about, and we crammed in as much information as we can. I remember the first time we ever ran a flashcaster across the bottom, and the network said, "You can't do that." I said, "Why?" They said, "Well, it's confusing." I said, "No, people are able to absorb more than one thing at a time." "Yes, but people will get mixed up." I said, "I hope so. The show is meant to mix people up." And the flashcaster was Help, Help. I'm being held captive in the NBC newsroom. And the people called the police. They couldn't believe this was on the screen. And I said, and they wanted us to stop it. I said, "Well, no." See, at that 45 years ago, with a 45 share, and only needing 2 hours of sleep a night, it was real tough to tell me no. And I had this band of political rebels behind me, and we pretty much did what we wanted to do. And it worked, and the audience bought it. People accepted Laugh-In on many levels. Kids saw the colors and the music and the girls and whatever. Teenagers looked and said, "Whoa, there's something going on here." Girls in bikinis with words printed on them, and what do the words say and where are they printed, you know. And then college kids said, "Wait a minute, these people are saying something we wish other people were saying, politically, you know." And also we said things that you couldn't say. Dan Rowan had a great joke. He said, "News of the future, 20 years from now. With marriage in the church now an accepted practice, the Archbishop and his lovely bride, the former Sister Mary Catherine, both announced this time it's for keeps, if only for the sake of the children." Whoa, man, you should have seen that phone light up, man. It looked like New Year's Eve in Times Square. But I said, no, that joke stays on the air. It's not offensive to anyone. It's news of the future. We're not saying it exists. Anyhow, it went on. It became one of our most famous jokes. The big difference, and I'm the biggest Tommy Smothers fan in the world, and I wish they were on the air now. Tommy had an agenda. Tommy wanted to convince you to believe what he believed. I just wanted to convince you that what you were believing could use revision. Tommy had a platform, and we did not. You were never aware of our agenda because we did jokes on both sides. We said everybody who is for abortion has already been born. We said things like that. Everybody, next time, if you don't like the police, next time you're being mugged, call a hippie. So we appeared to be on the middle and expressing both points of view. Through that came a rather revolutionary point of view that the show had, but you were never aware of it. With Tommy, you were aware of his political leanings constantly, and he was great for us because we could always blame it on Tommy. You know, we'd say, "You can't say that," and we said, "You could if you were on the Smothers Brothers show." And Tommy'd say, "Why are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're giving me all the heat." And I said, "Thank you very much." But I loved him. I loved he and Dickie were great and performed a very valuable service. They opened a lot of doors. See, they were on before us, and so it made it a little bit easier, you know. And then, but Tommy had it easier too because they did a lot of music. We didn't do music as such. We just did jokes. We did 1 hour jokes. My wife did all the Ernie Kovacs shows. She was the girl in the tub. She was the piano player in the Nairobi Trio. And Ernie and I, and Jolene was gorgeous and very funny. And Ernie loved her. And I used to sit up all night with Ernie, and he loved red wine. And I would say, "Ernie, you're so close to a joke. What you're doing is just wild and far out, but all you need is just a little bit more to have a snapper, to have a joke." "No, I don't want to do that." I said, "But Ernie, you're almost there now. Just one more line and it's a joke." And he didn't want to do jokes. So he called me one day. He wanted me to come over to the studio. And Jolene was over there, and he had her in a bathtub or in a gorilla suit or something. And I went over, and he was standing on a platform next to a car. And he said, "I really hope you'll buy this wonderful new car." And he hit the fender, and the car went through the floor. And then he turned around on camera and said, "Now, George, is that a joke?" He was a master. So I studied Ernie. And I studied Burl and Hope and Burns and Willie Weston McGinty and, you know, burlesque comics and Sid Caesar and Steve Allen. All of those people were part of our treasure, part of our heritage. And I believe we stole from all of them. Borrowed, we did a tribute to them, whatever you wanted to call it, it was stealing. We wanted to get as many jokes on the air as we could, and I have a plaque here somewhere from Rona Martin said, "In skating on thin ice, our safety's in our speed." See, when you saw the show, you would be into the next joke before you really got the last joke. And they would say to me, "Slow it down." I said, "No, people will understand it." And they said, "But they'll miss the jokes." I said, "Well, so what? There's another one coming along in just a few moments." But the speed of it took a lot of the curse off of some of the things we were saying. You know, it just went by so fast. You say, they didn't say that. But kids who could read and who could perceive and absorb more information than their parents were saying, "Wait a minute, they're saying some heavyweight stuff here." And we didn't pander. We didn't pander to kids or to adults or anybody. Everybody waited in industry. The oil companies and the congressmen and so forth all waited for that fickle finger of fate, which was a terrifying award to receive. And we gave it to the Pentagon regularly. See, the thing about Laugh-In is that we had all the same problems then that you have now. Military spending, corrupt government, stupid politicians, war that nobody really understood the reasons for, lying, cheating, stealing, poverty, welfare, racial tension. All of those problems existed in the 60s, and we haven't solved anything, which is the reason the reruns do so well now, or that the cassette DVD collections are selling because you look at it and it's almost as if it was today. And you replace Nixon with Bush and you're right on it, you know? So it was a golden time for us, and some of the show was prophetic, and of course it preceded Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels was one of our writers and was always kind of upset with me because I had to have punchlines. And on the door it said, "If you don't have a punchline, stay out." And it said, "And if it runs more than 2 minutes, it better be funny," right? And Lorne really never really found the reason for punchlines. And if we watch Saturday Night Live now, the sketches go on endlessly. And I had another sign, "Don't make me cue the band." Because if a joke was there, to get out of a sketch, you could always cue the orchestra. And so that was a way of ending the sketch without a joke. Well, we sat there all night till we found the joke. I miss it because I'm not too sure we could do it today, because technically it would be possible. What was impossible then would be possible today. Carolyn Raskin, would go down there and spend hours and hours and hours trying to cut it, and then the censors would come in, and the computer technology now would make it easier. But the sensitivity of the suits and the sponsors would make it very difficult. You see, NBC is owned by GE. You can't do a nuclear joke. How long since you heard a takeoff or a sketch about nuclear energy? You're not going to hear it. And CBS wants to own more stations, so they're not going to do anything that'll upset anybody, And Fox, what are they going to say, other than "Go get them, George"? So where's the arena? That's why it's necessary to keep PBS, but even PBS has a lot of heat. PBS serves a very vital function because it may be one of the last remaining islands, and even you are subjected to pressures. You need funding, and but I just hope that you hold on, because I don't know where it goes. See, I don't know what's going to happen to television. I don't know. There's so much non-news on now. And there's going to be more and more restrictions, and some of it's our own fault, because now with the new language that you can use and the new subject matter, we've taken a lot of the humor out, really, and replaced it with just shock. And there's some funny people, but once you drop the F-bomb, you don't need to say anything else. That's the joke. That becomes the joke. Whereas with Richard Pryor, or Red Fox, or Robin Williams, that would be said on the way to the joke, but it would not be instead of the joke. And we have to be careful, because we can easily lose the arena. We can easily lose the rights. Right now they would love to be able to censor Jon Stewart and Bill Maher and Stephen Colbert, which they have to be in a little island too, because the network television, as big a hit as they are, and a lot of our young people get their news from Leno, Letterman, Jon Stewart, but they would like to silence that. I'm sure that nobody's that happy with what Stephen Colbert says and what Jon Stewart says, but it's in a small enough arena that they can't do much about it. But if you get those guys on network television, they'd cut them off. Nothing's impossible. If you're willing to stay in, and take a few punches, nothing's impossible. Just because there will be new television, there will be new ideas, there will be new people. Somebody has to force it, because it will not be accepted easily. It will not go into the night quietly. So hang in and fool them. I guess maybe it helps a lot if you just don't tell them the truth about what you want to do. Then when you're a hit, you say, didn't I tell you about that?